Welcome, everybody, to Black and Gold Weekly, a weekly Boston Bruins show here on YouTube, brought to you in partnership with Black and Gold Productions. I am your host, John, and we've got another week of Boston Bruins action in the books. Also, a lot going on off the ice as well, especially with the return of Tuukka Rask. Also, some trade rumors swirling around the Bruins and some players that they could potentially be in on. So we got a lot to talk about this week. It is episode 50, the Big 5-0. And once again, special guest on the stream who really isn't more of a special guest at this point, kind of becoming the co-host. Danny is back again. Thank you for hopping on, man. Always great talking hockey with you. And ready to go for this week. A lot going on in the Bruins world.
It's becoming a weekly thing now. I don't know at what point it no longer becomes special, but I always appreciate you allowing me to be on here. And it's a very, very exciting time to be a Bruins fan in terms of news. And the fact that the team is playing better always helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Bruins had a strong week this past week. A couple of big road wins that I admittedly was not expecting them to get, but they were able to pull them out, and we'll certainly be talking about that later on in the show. But before we get started, I just want to thank Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. The show would not be happening without them, and can't thank them enough for all of their support. Also want to draw your attention down to the description of the video. We've got 3 links down there. If you're in the market for Boston Bruins apparel, that's the top link. Any NHL team apparel, that's the second link. And NCAA college apparel, that is the third link. If you're looking for any of those things, they got a wide variety of products to choose from. All your usual stuff like hats and jerseys and shirts and sweatshirts and all of that, but also some really cool accessory products as well that are all team branded. So it would be awesome if you guys could check those out. If you are in the market for any of those things, it would really help out a lot. But let's get into it now. Bruins talk, and obviously the biggest number one thing happened yesterday. Oh, just so you guys know, we're recording this on Wednesday. It'll be out on Friday, but we're recording Wednesday. Tuukka Rask returns to the Boston Bruins officially. Now, he's been practicing with the team for like 2 months now. Like, everybody knew this was coming. Everyone knew this was happening, but we just didn't know when. We didn't know when he would be ready, coming off of off-season surgery. But he officially signs a 1-year prorated contract, which basically just means it's the rest of this season. $1 million, and he is back into the fold, and he will be backing up Linus Ullmark tonight against the Montreal Canadiens. Ullmark gets a start, Rask backs up, and Jeremy Swayman has been sent back down to Providence to get some, at least keep playing and keep in the action and get some more development down in the AHL. I'm sure we're going to talk about that because that's been divisive among Bruins fans. Swayman getting sent down. There's a lot of people that are saying that he's getting screwed in this situation. There's a lot of other people saying, more development is never a bad thing for a young goaltender. But anyway, Danny, Tuukka Rask back. I just kind of want your general thoughts on what's going on here.
You just want to see me go on a rant at 10:30 in the morning. It's way too early for this. But I mean, honestly, I don't love it. All the people who really like Tuukka, it's very interesting. He's one of the most polarizing athletes in Boston sports. Me, I don't really like it because, yes, everybody points to, he plays well in the regular season. He's a Vezina Trophy winner, Vezina Trophy candidate, but he doesn't perform when the lights are the brightest. I don't like this at all. I think that he's shown that sometimes he tends to struggle on the big stage and sometimes he can't handle the big stage. And look, let me say this, I'm not bashing his mental health. Mental health is very important and, well-being is very important, but he's shown that he can't handle the big stage. And yes, we have the rest of the regular season to go, and the Bruins are still trying to solidify, their playoff push, but I really don't like it. I mean, I think that Swayman did kind of get the short end of the stick on this one. I mean, more development is never a bad thing, but I just worry that this will kind of set him back a little bit. And you know, I mean, Swayman's worked really hard at trying to become the number one goaltender, and then Rask immediately, not immediately, but he comes back with the team in the second half of the year, and immediately Swayman gets sent down. I don't like it at all. I really don't.
Yeah, the knock against Tuukka has always been playoff performance and, especially elimination games. And him just coming up short in those big moments, those big games. Man, there's so much to unpack here. I'm trying to organize my thoughts because this is such a complicated situation. And it's hard to lay everything out. First, I want to say this. There is no such thing as too much depth at any position in the NHL. Having a third NHL caliber goaltender is a very good thing for the Boston Bruins, especially in, the times we're in right now with COVID and with, just the uncertainty of the schedule, the uncertainty of the rosters. Having three goaltenders is never, ever a bad thing. And I think, if we look at the situation Boston was in before Rask came back, Ullmark and Swayman were playing well, and I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit here. But if anything were to happen to either Ullmark or Swayman, and they were to suffer an injury, or they were to go into COVID protocol and miss games, or, Boston didn't really have NHL options beyond those two. If either of them got seriously injured and was going to be out for 3 to 4 months or something like that, who's the other goaltender at that point? You've got Troy Grosnick, who's a career AHLer, and Kyle Kaiser, who is nowhere near NHL ready down in the minors. You didn't have another goaltending option. So this now puts Boston in a position where they have depth at the goaltending position. And, if something happens to Ullmark or if something happens to Rask, they have Swayman now. They have a guy there who we trust and is reliable at the NHL level to be able to come back in and just keep the train on the track, so to say, at the NHL level. Whereas if they were calling up Kaiser or Grosnick, that's not a reliable NHL goalie. So I think Boston is much deeper now in net, and I think it's a really good thing to have three NHL caliber goaltenders, because if anything happens to your top two guys, you have a third guy there who can play. Swayman and Ullmark have been very good this season. Man, there's been some slander against Linus Ullmark, and I don't get it. If you told me that my goaltender was going to have twice as many wins as losses and a .917 save percentage on the season, I am taking that all day.
Right.
Ullmark is 11-5 with a .917 save percentage and a 2.57 goals against. What more can you really want than that? If you told me at the beginning of the season that that's what Ullmark was going to have, I'm taking that all day.
Absolutely.
And Swayman's played well, too. Swayman's had a solid year. He's got 8 wins. He's got a 2.26 goals against, which is very good. He's got a .918 save percentage, which, again, is one fraction of a point higher than Ullmark's. But both of them together have been very solid this season, and I don't think goaltending was even remotely a problem for the Bruins. But I think what Rask coming back does is adds depth to that position. And again, I'm kind of conflicted on it because, yes, Tuukka has been a great goaltender throughout his entire career. He's put up spectacular numbers. Obviously, he kind of has the playoff knock against him, but he's a very good goaltender. But at the same time, goaltending wasn't a problem. And Ullmark and Swayman were fine. They were doing very well as the tandem. So I like the depth aspect of it. But at the same time, it does kind of feel like a knock against Ullmark and Swayman. Like the team didn't believe in Ullmark and Swayman, when in reality, they've been playing very well this year, and they should be believed. And I think they're both very good goaltenders. So I'm a little bit conflicted on it. The other thing, though, is, and I want to point this out about Jeremy Swayman because Ty Anderson from 98.5 tweeted this last night, and I thought it made a good argument for the Bruins bringing Rask back. Swayman, as good as he's been in his career and as good as his numbers are overall this year, Swayman's played very well against not so good teams and against teams that are currently in a playoff spot. Swayman was 1-5-1 this year with a .903 save percentage. So he's been struggling against good teams and he's been playing extremely well against not good teams. And when it comes to playoff time, those not so good teams are gone. So I think Ullmark would have been the starter in the playoffs anyway. We're seeing Ullmark get the tough games. He's played back-to-back against Tampa and Washington. And that, I think the Bruins probably had that statistic and knew about it, and that's why we've been seeing Ullmark get these tough games like in Calgary and Edmonton and against Washington and Tampa Bay. Ullmark is getting those games, and I think that statistic might be why.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very interesting in terms of the argument that you could make for or against. I mean, I do agree that Swayman has struggled against the tougher teams. I'm just, you know, with the way that Swayman and Allmark were playing together, like you said, and
Hmm.
then just bringing Rask back and sending Swayman down. I mean, a continuity in sports is very hard to find,
Hmm.
and I'm I'm just wondering if it was the right choice breaking up the continuity with Allmark and Swayman in order to bring Rask back. Now we'll see what happens in the playoffs, but I don't know. It's just I feel like it's the New York Giants with Eli Manning back in the day. The Giants held on to Eli Manning way too
Hmm.
long, hoping that he would return to what he used to be. And
Yeah.
now I just feel the same way with Rask. I feel like the Bruins Rask is not a bad goaltender, but I just you know me, I have I guess this anti Tuukka Rask
Hmm.
bias, but it's just tough. It really is tough. I wouldn't want to be the one making that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I love the depth aspect of it. I love them having three goaltenders now. I love, the fact that they've got reliable goaltending that they can trust and believe in, and really, and really have multiple goaltenders that they trust and believe in. I think that's a really good thing. But at the same time, it almost feels like a swipe at Ullmark and Swayman, like they didn't believe in them. And I have a problem with that because I believe in Ullmark and Swayman. I think they've both had very solid years this year. Ullmark had a shaky start, but he's been fantastic over as the season's gone along. He's just gotten better and better. I mean, this is a guy that's coming off of back-to-back road wins over Tampa Bay and Washington, where he held Tampa Bay to 2 goals and Washington to 3. Like
Yep.
that's very good goaltending. Like I believe that the Bruins can win with Linus Ullmark, and this kind of feels like they're making a move for something that they don't necessarily need, but at the same time, I do like the depth aspect of it. It's going to be interesting to see how it all works out. Um, Now I want to ask you this. Do you think that this is it for Tuukka Rask? Do you think like he's retired and done after this season, and this is him just trying to get that one last push, that one last swan song before it's all over?
That's a good question because I think it truthfully depends on how he finishes out this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like if he really plays well for the rest of this season, I could see him maybe coming back for one more year. If he struggles, I could see him, hanging up the skates. It's really interesting because like in terms of hockey years, Tuukka Rask, how old is he? Is he
34.
34? Okay, so I mean, I could see either way. Um, I don't have a definitive answer for you, but if you had to make me guess, I would say probably yes. I mean, you look at what Swayman has been able to do, and you
Mm-hmm.
look at, you just mentioned the tandem of Swayman and Allmark. The Bruins have shown that they have other capable goaltenders, and for the future, Swayman's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
And I will say this: what the Bruins have been able to do well and what Don Sweeney has been able to do well is find backup goaltenders. They were able
Mm-hmm.
to get Halak and they were
Yep.
able to get Allmark. So I feel like if Swayman is the starting goaltender for the future,
Mm-hmm.
Sweeney and Neely and whoever will be able to find a capable backup goaltender if they need to find another one down the road.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't an area that I'd be nervous about,
Yep.
so I could definitely see this being Rask's final season because with the emergence of Swayman and the Bruins' ability to find reliable goaltending for a fairly good price,
Yeah.
I don't see where Rask would want to come back.
Yeah, I do think that this is Rask's last kind of one final ride, one last playoff push for a cup, and I don't know that. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't have any inside information or anything like that,
Me
but
either. Yeah.
we've been, rumors about Rask retiring early have been around really since he turned 30. Like they've been around for at least the last few years. People have been talking about Rask, getting to the end and maybe wanting to go back to Finland or, him just not playing deep. Like Rask was never a guy that people were expecting to play until he was 40 or you're 38. Like 34 is not that old. He could potentially, from a skill standpoint, play in another 4 or 5 years. I just don't think he wants to, and I think this is that one last push. We know that he doesn't want to play anywhere else other than Boston. I think if he was going to come back beyond this year, I think this probably would have been a 2-year contract. I think it's very telling that this is just a 1-year rest of the season kind of deal. And I think this is, him coming off of surgery, doesn't have to play a full season, only has to play the back half of the year and can take that one last push for a Stanley Cup. And I feel like this is going to be his last shot and this is kind of his last ride. And then when this is whatever happens, when it's all said and done, I think he's probably going to retire after the end of this season. And I think Olmark was brought in to be that transitional guy going from Rask until Swayman is ready to be the franchise guy. Because Swayman's got loads of potential. He's a very, very good young goaltender, but he's 23 years old and he's not a finished product yet. Like, I'm not throwing Jeremy Swayman out for 60 games in a season and telling him like the franchise is is on your back. Like, you have to be the number one guy. He's not there yet. As good of a young goaltender as he is not a finished product. He is not a franchise guy yet. Olmark is that transitional goaltender from Rask finishing up his career until Swayman gets to be about 25, 26 years old and is ready to be that franchise guy.
And I will say this, one of the things we've always said on this show was that the Bruins have failed to develop talent. We're looking at the years post Marchand, Pastrnak, and Bergeron, and we were worried about the farm system. The
Mm-hmm.
Bruins have done a decent job at planning for life after Tuukka Rask,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to give them credit there because I'm always quick to knock them for not being able to develop talent, but they certainly have options after Rask, and finding good goaltending, as I'm seeing in games across the league, is not as easy as it may seem.
As much as the Bruins can't find skilled forwards to save their lives, they're pretty good at developing goaltenders.
Yep. And
Goaltender is that one position where like, Vladar turned out very good and now, signed with or got traded to Calgary and, is a backup with the Flames, but Malcolm Subban was just a bad pick. I don't
yeah,
think that was on the Bruins. I just don't think he's a very good goalie. But they've done fairly well with goaltenders. Rask has been a franchise guy for over a decade. He came up through through Providence and ended up in Boston and becoming a Vezina level goaltender. Swayman looks like he's turning out pretty solid. They've done fairly well with goaltending, so I will give them that from a development standpoint. And I think Swayman is going to be a franchise guy, in my opinion, down the line. But again, he's still, I think, a couple years away. He could certainly be an NHL goalie in a tandem right now, like he has been for the first part of this season. But I don't think he's going to be that franchise level starter probably for another couple of years.
Yeah, I still think he has some work to do, but the Bruins,
Yeah.
have done a nice job of preparing him for the long haul. And as
Mhm.
long as they keep up with, making sure he develops properly and not putting too much on him, I could definitely see him in a number one goaltending role in just a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's not, it's not really a bad thing for him to go back to Providence and just get some more development, get some more action. And he does have a little bit more work to do. And now with a third goaltender up in Boston, and Olmark's been playing a lot of the big games anyway. You know, at least down in Providence, Swayman is going to be the guy. And Swayman is going to be playing a lot in Providence. He's going to be on game in and game out their number one guy. He's going to get a lot of action and going to get to hone those skills. Whereas even up in Boston, he even when he was the backup, or in the tandem with Ullmark, he was going for 5 days without playing a game because Ullmark, was taking multiple games in a row because Ullmark's been playing really well and winning games. And he's 11-5 this year. That's a darn good record. And Swayman was not getting as much game action as he's going to get now down in Providence, where he's gonna, I think, have a chance to play a lot of games. I think that experience and that action is gonna help him become a better goaltender.
Absolutely, and it will certainly set him up for the future, like you said. And I'll be interested to see how he does in Providence
Mm-hmm.
and if he can handle being that number one goaltender for extended periods of time. I think it's going to be very important that he continues his upward trajectory for his development, and hopefully we'll be able to see him in a starting role sooner rather than later. But I feel like the Rask storyline is something we're going to be talking about in the summer, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Because, like you said, just circling back here, there's always been, rumors of him retiring early.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's had a decently long career. I think was he involved in the Andrew Raycroft trade? Was he part of that
Uh,
deal or no? I can't remember.
yeah,
He
yeah, it
was.
was.
So yeah, Andrew Raycroft is currently on Nesson right now. So
Yes.
that's how long Tuukka Rask has been around. So I don't know. We'll have to see. This whole goaltending situation is almost like an embarrassment of riches at the moment, which is something we can't say for other something we can't say for other skill positions.
Yeah, so back in June of 2006, the Leafs traded Tuukka Rask to the Bruins for Andrew Raycroft. Now, Andrew Raycroft um, won Rookie of the Year his first year with the Bruins
This
in the
must be the next
NHL
big
and
thing.
was a highly, highly touted goaltender early in his career and literally just fell off a cliff. Like, one of the worst downspins of a career that I've seen in the NHL, going from Rookie of the Year to literally not being able to stop a beach ball in the matter of just a few seasons. Um, but yeah, Raycroft only played one full season for the Leafs.
Yeah.
And in his second season with the Leafs, he was traded to Colorado, and he was awful there too. But yeah, that trade was back in 2006. And Rask obviously now is 34 years old, which again, age-wise, Rask could potentially play for another 4+ years, but there's always been this thought and consensus that he wasn't going to play late into his 30s and that he was going to be an early retirement guy.
He's had a long career. I mean, 2006, I was 11 years old. I'm not
Yeah.
27, so it's not like he's skimping out on years here. 34 may seem young, but when you look at a guy like Patrice Bergeron, too, he started when he was, what, 18?
18 in 2003.
And so, yeah, so a lot of these guys, I hate to say it, but a lot of these guys have certainly paid their dues and are
Mhm.
at the retirement age because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But all right, so we've talked about Rask. Obviously, that's the big, big story here this week with the Bruins is Tuukka coming back. And we've got our thoughts out about that, and we'll have to see how he plays. I'm really interested to see how he looks. coming off of a major surgery too, like that's a whole other element into this. Like, um, is he still going to be that elite level goaltender with the 920 save percentage and the 2.1, 2.2 goals against average? Or are we going to see a slip in Tuukka Rask, not only because of he hasn't played in months, but also because of the surgery?
Yeah, and it's also interesting to think like you have to think that he's thinking in his head, how many more major surgeries do I want to do to try to
Mm-hmm.
keep my playing career alive? Because these major surgeries, these athletes make it look easy. Oh, ACLs you can recover really quickly from now, but there's
Yeah.
this whole other element of trying to get back and trying to work, and
Yeah.
there's this whole other mental toll that's not even involved in sports. Like how
Yeah.
many more times would he want to do that? That
Exactly. So
I
that's
wouldn't
an
want to do it anymore.
yeah, no, exactly. That's another big question. But outside of Tuukka Rask, there's also been a lot of trade rumors involved with the Bruins, particularly on the back end, looking for defensemen. And two very big names have come up on the trade market. First, it was Jakob Chychrun from the Arizona Coyotes. Young defenseman, 23 years old, I believe. 3 years left on his contract beyond this year at a very, very good cap hit. So very, coveted type of D-man there where you've got a left shot guy at 23 who's on the trade market who is coming off of a 41-point season last year with Arizona. Has struggled this year, only 7 points in 26 games this season. Also has been injured this year, but Arizona's terrible. I would take his stats with a grain of salt. We know the
Yeah.
potential that Chychrun has to be a top pair defenseman, and talk about somebody that would be a massive boost to the Bruins blue line, but also going to come at a huge cost. John Klingberg's a little bit older at 29. He's in the last year of his contract. Contract extension talks with Dallas have broken down. Klingberg's numbers have gone down from where they were early in his career. He's kind of taken a secondary role on that blue line behind Miro Heiskanen, and Klingberg now has requested a trade and wants out of Dallas. So he's another option. He's a right shot D-man who's older and more of a rental type player because I don't think the Bruins would have the cap space to sign him beyond this year. But going to come at less of a cost than what a young guy like Jakob Chychrun is going to cost. What are your thoughts on the Bruins potentially making a move for one of these defensemen?
When I look at Jakob Chychrun, you said he's a young defenseman, which he is. He has 3 years left on his deal, and he would be a massive boost defensively. The asking price is probably going to be very high, like you
It's
mentioned,
it's huge.
but I would honestly, I want to see it all comes down to the big three and their time in the league. This is probably one of the last couple of seasons, I'd say maybe even the last season, where all three of them will still play at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, I would honestly want to go all in. If Chychrun was a 1 year rental, I would say absolutely not, just because of the high asking price, but
Mm-hmm.
because he still has 3 years left on his deal, that would be something that would be very tempting for me, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see how the Bruins have drafted over the past couple of years. I would rather use those draft picks for a proven young player than trying to take my chances in the draft because as we've seen over the years, anything outside the top 10 in the NHL draft is, almost kind of like a guessing game.
Yeah.
And so I would be very tempted to make that deal happen. Now, as far as Klingberg goes, I think a 1 year rental would be intriguing. I mean, you said he's a little bit older, which he is. And, I feel like he would be also a good addition. But with Chychrun, the thing that intrigues me is that the Bruins would have something to build around for the next couple of years, as well as, you know, get a player that has tremendous point potential. And, the Bruins already have a defenseman like that. You've probably heard of him, Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that would be very intriguing for me, and I would almost pull the trigger on a Chychrun trade, even if the asking price is high.
Yeah, so Klingberg to me, like he'd be a nice solid addition for a playoff run this year. Obviously, I wouldn't want to give up a whole lot to get him because it would most likely be a rental type thing. But to me, Klingberg should be like the backup plan because at least it'd be an addition to the back end and it would improve the Bruins D. Because I'll put this out there right now. I very much think that the Bruins must add a defenseman if they're going to be a legitimate Stanley Cup threat this year and actually want to make a deep run into the playoffs. Their D, as it's constructed now, is not deep enough. It's just not. They need at least one more solid body top four guy on that back end, I think. And Klingberg would be fine. He'd be okay. He can fill that role and can be a solid addition, but that should be a backup plan, in my opinion. I want Jakob Chychrun. I
Mm-hmm.
really want Jakob Chychrun, and I'd be willing to give up a lot to get him
Yep.
because he's a left shot, top pair potential. Could be a 50-plus point defenseman if he's playing at his highest level, maybe even a 60-point defenseman. And he's a guy that obviously, really struggling this year in Arizona, but Arizona is awful. Like barely an NHL team. Him in Boston, I think you would see how great of a young D-man he is. If you put him in a situation on a good team with good players around him, and I think you would just see his play elevate even more from what he's been able to do in Arizona. If you could have Charlie McAvoy and Jakob Chychrun as your top pair, with McAvoy on the right side and Chychrun on the left, you're looking at one of the best top D pairs in the NHL at that point. And
Yeah.
that is, especially with him having term on his contract at a very reasonable cap hit. I think it's like 4.6 million or something like that. I am all in on Jakob Chychrun being a Boston Bruin.
Which means that the deal probably won't get done.
It's not.
Uh,
It
yeah.
probably isn't going to happen, but
But it
I'd
is
be
fun to
willing to
tweet.
package a lot to Arizona, to make this happen.
If I was Don Sweeney, I would make the deal, but I am not Don Sweeney, so we'll have to see what he does. But I would be very tempted to make that happen. Like you, I think it would be an amazing trade for Boston, and it would give the Bruins a solid defense pairing for not just this year, but for the next couple of years.
I mean, you got McAvoy locked into a long-term deal. You'd have Chicken for at least 3 more years. You've got Carlo locked in now. I mean, talk about a top in Grislick. Still got some
Yeah,
term left. I mean, talk about a top four right there.
absolutely.
McAvoy, Chychrun, Carlo, and Grislick. If that's your top four, holy cow, that is a contending level top four defense, which the Bruins don't have right now. They're missing one piece out of that contending level defense.
I'm getting fired up just thinking about it, so I better calm down because I know
Yeah,
it
it's
won't
not
happen.
gonna
But
happen,
boy,
so calm down. But
but boy,
it would be glorious if it
that
did.
would be something, wouldn't it? That would be something,
It
and
would.
we'll have to see what happens. But I'm gonna have to see what team he goes to because whatever team he goes to is going to get a darn good defenseman.
Oh yeah, I'm a
Darn-
big fan. All right, so obviously trade rumors have been swirling around the Bruins really all season. Rumors about D-men, rumors about potential second line centers. Tomas Hertl possibly. Although I don't know if San Jose is going to be giving up Hertl this year because they're in a wild card spot now, and I don't think they're going to stay in that wild card spot. But teams generally don't like to sell unless they're really down and out of it. And we'll see, maybe San Jose is down and out of it by the time we get to the trade deadline. But San Jose's been a little more competitive than I was expecting this year. So I don't know if they're going to just, ditch Hertl at the deadline.
No, it's one of those things like we talked about last week. These standings are extremely close
Yeah,
in both conferences, so you don't want to make any drastic moves while you still have a shot. It's one thing if
exactly.
you're Arizona and you're at the bottom and you're looking to sell and build for the future, but right now you don't want to mess any good thing up while it's still going.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think those teams that are within striking distance of a wild card spot probably aren't going to be the big sellers. I mean, Vancouver was having such an awful start to the season, everybody thought that they were going to start dumping players like Brock Besser and JT Miller and guys like that. All of a sudden, Vancouver's within striking distance of a wild card spot. I think they're like 6 points out right now. Like, they're not going to dump star players because they're not going to sell like that at this point because they still could potentially get in. Anaheim, before the season started, everybody thought Anaheim was going to be like a last place team and thought that they'd be moving guys. And now all of a sudden they're in a playoff spot and they're in the top 3 in the Pacific. So I don't think there are many clear sellers right now outside of like Seattle, Ottawa, who really is kind of comprised of a lot of young guys and isn't really going to have much to sell. Montreal, obviously, and Arizona, who's been brutal. Seattle, like teams like that. But there aren't that many sellers right now.
No, and you don't want to be that GM that ends up selling and it backfires on you either. So,
Yeah.
so it's going to be a fascinating couple of months, both in terms of playoff races and in terms of who sells and who stays. It's going to be a fun stretch here, and
Yep.
it's hockey at its best, as I like to say.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an awesome rest of the way for sure. And we got the trade deadline coming up in March. And I think by March, we're going to have a few more teams drop back into that seller category. I think probably Columbus drops back, Chicago for sure, New Jersey. Although I don't know how much New Jersey's going to want to sell off because they're kind of on that upswing building for the future. They might move a guy or two, who knows. But I think we'll have a little bit clearer picture come the trade deadline, but right now, I don't think there are that many teams that you can call full-on sellers just because they're still within striking distance of a wild card spot.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. It's gonna be interesting to see what names are gonna be moved, and
Hmm.
um, maybe the Bruins will be in on that action. Maybe not. That's gonna be interesting to watch for me because
Yeah.
the Bruins last year they went out and got Taylor Hall, so
Yeah.
they're not opposed to making big moves, but oftentimes the moves that we like to dream of in our heads never come to fruition.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with Chychrun or Klingberg or anybody else here with Boston, but um, I would love Jakob Chychrun. I just feel like it's kind of a pipe dream and probably not actually going to happen, but boy, would I be very, very happy if it did.
Absolutely. I would go out and buy his jersey right away. And you talk about depth needed for the playoffs. That defensive pair, oof.
I wonder what
That's
number he would wear because 6 is taken by Mike Riley. So I wonder who Chychrun would maybe be taking Mike Riley's spot in the lineup, which would actually be kind of funny. But I wonder what jersey number Chychrun would wear. He'd have to find something else.
I know.
That'd
It's
be interesting.
or maybe it's one of those things where Chychrun says, "Hey Riley, I'll give you X amount of money in exchange for your number."
Yeah, I don't know. Riley might want to keep 6 because he just signed a multi-year extension, so he's gonna be a Bruin at least for another few years, unless we trade him. Maybe he's a part of a deadline trade. Who knows?
And that piece of it is interesting too. If you're going to add Mike Riley in a trade, similar to Chychrun, he has multiple years
Yeah,
available. So that's always an intriguing trade factor when dealing with teams.
DeBrusk, Riley, Studnicka, and a first to Arizona.
You know, if I was Arizona, that would be tempting for me.
I
But
feel like Arizona's going to want more than just DeBrusk and Riley as far as NHL players now. But I'd offer that if I were the Bruins. DeBrusk, Riley, a first, and Studnicka. I'd do that in a heartbeat if I'm the Bruins.
I'm putting on my NHL video game simulator and offering whatever I can.
Yeah,
Honestly, like I would do whatever it took to get Chychrun, but again, we're not general managers, and
yeah.
Don Sweeney knows better than us. Although sometimes I wonder, and and so it's fun to think about, isn't it? Though
Oh,
it really is.
very fun to think about. Absolutely. All right, so I want to take a look at these last few games now for the Bruins. Because last week we talked about what a tough stretch this was for Boston, and they had some real quality opponents coming up, and that they were starting to get into really the nitty-gritty of the schedule, because when they started January, yes, they were winning games and playing really well, but they were playing Detroit and Buffalo and New Jersey and non-playoff teams. Now all of a sudden the schedule's switched, and they've had a lot of tough matchups going back to the end of last week, and we're going to start with the Minnesota game. First of all, we looked at Minnesota through Philadelphia, the Thursday to Thursday schedule. The Bruins had 5 games. We wanted Boston to get at least 6 out of those 10 possible points going into this very tough stretch of the schedule. We started off Thursday against Minnesota. It was a home game, not in Minnesota, but against Minnesota. And Boston loses this game 3-2. 1-goal game, very close, very tight. But Boston just wasn't able to get that third goal to tie it up. Bruins actually took a 1-0 lead in this game. Then Minnesota scored 3 straight goals between the end of the first period and early in the second period. They go up 3-1, and then Brad Marchand ties it late in the second period. Or no, doesn't tie it. Brings it back to a 1-goal game. However, nobody scores a goal in the third period, and the game ends 3-2. A lot of power play goals in that game. 4 of the 5 goals came on the power play between the two teams. Both teams had 2 power play goals. Lots of hits, couple of fights, very physical, nasty game, which was interesting because these aren't like rival teams. It's not like they play each other a lot or anything like that. But I don't know. It was a crazy, wild game, but Boston just came up a little bit short.
It was, and there was some statistics that really jumped out at me as I was watching this too. The Bruins, at the midpoint of the second period, they had 21 shots. 13 of them came on the power play. And so it was truly a situation where, you saw the physicality and the nastiness, and the Bruins were just unable to convert. They played well. It was one of those games where they played well, but the Wild played solid defensively, especially in the third period. The Bruins had a little bit of a third period surge, and they were able to get into the Minnesota zone and get shots, but the Wild stood firm, and they were able to come into Boston and take the win. And also shout out to Matt Boldy scoring his first NHL goal, former Boston College Eagles star, and boy, that must have been quite a moment.
Oh, yeah, his family was all in the crowd, too, and everything. Like, massive moment for Matthew Boldy. So, huge congratulations to him. I remember watching him at BC. Love the kid. Such a fun player to watch. Great scorer. And Minnesota's got themselves a great young player with Matthew Boldy.
They really do. And it's interesting that a Minnesota team is taking a guy from Massachusetts because, Minnesota has a good pipeline of their own, and yet a lot of even the Minnesota college players come to Massachusetts. So I think that's a win for the North over here, and that definitely for sure.
Hockey East for sure, that's a win.
Yeah. Hockey
all right,
East
so
is like the SEC of college hockey.
College hockey, yeah. You texted me after the Minnesota game, not a good start, because we had talked about them needing to win, a certain number of these tough games, and they lose the first one, and we actually thought that Minnesota would be the one that they might win, and weren't expecting wins against some of the other teams, but you texted me not a good start, and the Bruins pick up a regulation loss, and yeah, it was a tough one. It was a hard-fought game. 2, I think, fairly evenly matched teams going at it, and Minnesota just came out on the better end of it with that big second period that they had. We go into Tampa Bay on Saturday. I will say it right now, I was not expecting a win in this game.
You texted me that you were not expecting a win on Saturday against Tampa Bay, so I wasn't either, honestly. Tampa Bay has always, been the thorn in the Bruins side.
Especially the last, 3 years, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And,
4 years even.
It's one of those games where the last couple of years, whenever I've turned on the Bruins Lightning games, I've just closed my eyes and hope for the best.
Yep.
But circling back very, very quickly, I want to say I was really impressed with the ESPN presentation on Thursday against Minnesota. I
Yep.
liked like the graphics and all of the things like that. I thought the announcers were really good. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm hopefully the Bruins play more on ESPN
Yeah.
down the road because I really liked what they were able to do. They were bright graphics, good commentating, and it was definitely really cool to see for sure. But as far as the Tampa Bay game goes, this was one of those games where you needed the stars to show up, and they did so certainly in a big way.
Yeah.
Um, we're talking about a guy like Pasternak. We mentioned it in the last show. He has the flashy playmaking ability, but we really haven't seen it consistently over these last couple games, and particularly in the Tampa Bay game. We started to see him, you know, bring that flash to the table and get pucks in the back of the net.
Pasta's on fire right now. These last few games, he is starting to play like David Pastrnak is supposed to be playing. Like he's been lighting it up these last few games, and I think kind of that Christmas break and that reset that the Bruins got with like the 2 weeks between games and whatever, they've come out of that break on a total different level than where they were before that. And David Pastrnak individually has come out on a total different level from where he's been before. He is getting hot right now.
And he's getting hot at the right time. And when we talked about in last week's show, we could look at this Christmas break as a pivotal point in the season in
Yep.
terms of allowing the team to reset.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look at this Lightning game. The Bruins win 5-2. They actually were up 4-0 at one point in this game. Just absolutely dominant early in the game for the Bruins. I was watching this game with a couple friends were over. Brody and Michaela were over, and we were watching this game. And I'm like, holy crap, what is happening? Boston just goes in. Pastrnak scores a minute and 11 seconds into the game. And then scores again just over 6 minutes. 5 minutes later, scores again. And Boston's up 2-0. They go to the intermission up 2-0. Then in the second period, Marchand scores 26 seconds in. And it's like, what is happening here? Tampa Bay's imploding. Like, Boston just taking it to him. Anton Bleed gets his second goal of the season. He scores in the second period. It's 4-0 Boston. At that point, we started doing other stuff. Like, I turned the game off and we started doing other stuff. I'm like, bruh, what is happening here? Boston's just dominating the Lightning. Now, the Lightning did kind of try and make some sort of a comeback in the third period. They got 2 goals to make it 4-2. But then Marchand finishes it off at the end with the 5th goal for the Bruins, and Boston hangs on for the 5-2 win. Pretty dominant performance. But what I really liked about this was that, obviously, Pastrnak 2 goals, Marchand 2 goals, Bergeron with an assist. Like, you had your big guns, Taylor Hall with 2 assists. You had your big guns involved offensively, but you also had Anton Bleed score a goal. You also had Oscar Steen pick up an assist. You had Eric Halla pick up an assist. You had Mike Riley and Derek Forbert and Urho Vakanainen pick up assists from defensemen. Olmark had a very strong game in goal, 27 out of 29, 931 save percentage. Like everybody contributed to this win for the Bruins.
And two statistics stood out to me for this game.
Mm-hmm.
30-29 shot advantage in favor of the Bruins. That is obviously not a huge shot advantage, but we've
Very
talked about
close.
yeah, but we've talked about them converting on their chances, and that's exactly what
Yep.
they did on Saturday night. And also 0 giveaways. That is how you win hockey games. You take
Yep.
care of the puck. We've mentioned before how sometimes the Bruins make silly turnovers in their own zone, or they make mental mistakes that cost them goals on the other end. And we didn't really see much of that on Saturday.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to I'd have to go back and watch this game again to see this, but I feel like this statistician was very lenient because he only had 2 giveaways written for the Lightning and 0 for the Bruins. I feel like there were probably some more turnovers in the game than that, but
Yeah,
um,
I was
they
looking at that too.
obviously a very low number in the giveaway category there, which I guess is definitely a good thing for both of these teams. But I feel like that statistician might have missed throughout the game. But still, obviously, they weren't making obvious turnovers. They weren't giving the puck away in the defensive zone. They weren't, making those dumb plays that usually results in the goals back in the back of your own net. And we didn't see that on Saturday from the Bruins at all.
I was gonna say, if it was alarming, the statistician would have known.
Yeah, exactly.
So at the very least, it wasn't alarming, which is always, a good thing against a very talented and potent team like the Lightning.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, huge win, huge win on Saturday night in Tampa Bay for the Bruins against a very difficult opponent and an opponent that's had their number for a lot of the last few years. And I was very impressed. I was surprised. I was not expecting that, but I was very obviously happy to see it. The Bruins play the way that they did against Tampa Bay. Then we have Monday night. And Boston has another very difficult, good opponent on the road in Washington. And I actually called play-by-play for this game, so I saw every second of this game. And this was another one where, man, Boston is showing something here. Like, the Bruins are looking like a different team in 2022 compared to how they were playing in the early part of this season. And Boston goes down 2-0 in the first period. First goal was early on, like 3 minutes in. Connor Sherry scores on a backhand. It was not a great goal to give up if you're Linus Ullmark. It was kind of a bad giveaway and a rebound right out in front. It was not a good start, to say the least. Sherry snipes another one later in the first. That was much more of just to kind of tip your cap and it was a great shot from Connor Sherry, the second goal. Washington goes up 2-0, and at that point, I'm like, well, Boston's been playing well. The game is definitely not over, but this is not the situation you wanted to find yourself in. The Bruins,
No.
the Bruins then score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight goals.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the ideal situation, but again, we saw, guys like Anton Beed and Taylor Hall, 2 assists. Pasta and Marchand had 2 goals, and it was a tale of resiliency against Washington, and this
Yep.
is something that you want to see from the Bruins come playoff time. The big guns in Marchand and Pasta were able to help get it done, but also the secondary players for the second game in a row really stepped up and provided that depth that we have been searching for the better part of the season.
Absolutely. This was another one of those games where it was everybody. It was star players, it was depth guys, everybody coming together and contributing to this win. Boston 2 for 4 on the power play. That was big. They got back into this game on the power play with 2 power play goals late in the first period, both with less than 2 minutes to go. Pastrnak scores the first one. Marchand scores the second one. All of a sudden, it goes from 2-0 Washington and the Caps being in complete control to going into the first intermission with a tied hockey game.
Yeah, and you talk about, momentum shifting. If that period ended with Washington up 2-0,
Yep.
I wonder how the rest of the game would have turned out. But those goals at the end of the first period, that might have changed the trajectory of the game, and the Bruins probably thought, "Hey, now we're in this thing."
Yeah, absolutely. And them getting back into it at the end of the first set them up for maybe the best period of the Bruins season. The second period against this Capitals team. Matt Grislick scores. Craig Smith scores. David Pastrnak scores. Eric Haula scores. 6-2 Boston. This was a 2-0 Capitals lead. By the latter part of the second period, it was 6-2 Boston. They just completely took this game over.
And again, we're seeing everybody contribute. Matt Grislick, Eric Haula, Craig Smith. I mean, this is something that, playoff teams do.
Yep.
This is how playoff teams win games.
Yep.
And, the Bruins really got everybody involved on Monday, and that's something that's going to need to continue. We've seen it well over this past week. They've been able to do it well, and depth players are starting to play like we envisioned they would at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, TJ Oshie did score one late in the second to get the Capitals back to within three. It was a 6-3 game at the end of the second, and then in the third, there. Honestly, this was one of those third periods where just not a lot happened. It felt like the game was over at that point, and just not a lot happened. Marchand ended up scoring a third period goal for Boston to put. I mean, that really sealed the game 7-3. But the game felt like it was over before that, and the third period just didn't have a whole lot going on.
Yeah, it was one of those kind of
Clock
just
watcher.
we yeah,
I call
kind of
them
just
clock
wait,
watchers.
kind of just wait and
Yep.
make sure nothing stupid happens,
Yep.
and just wait till the horn sounds.
Absolutely. That was one where it seemed like they were just running down the clock and waiting for that one to be done. But we cannot talk about this game without talking about Matt Grislick. 5-point night on the back end for Grizz. 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, +2. And this was a guy that we talked about not too long ago, needing to add some more offense and needing to contribute more offensively, get his point total up this season because they were relying way too much on McAvoy to be the only real offensive defenseman. Well, Grislick certainly brought it Monday night. There's no doubt about that. He is the first Bruins defenseman to have 5 points in a game since Ray Bourque in 1994. I wasn't even born yet. So that was obviously a huge night to for Matt Grislick.
Yeah, and we were frustrated with Matt Grislick because
Yep.
we've seen, at BU what he was able to do with McAvoy, and the biggest thing for him has never been skill. It's always about, been about staying healthy.
Hmm.
Now he's starting to find his footing, and if he can emerge as a consistent offensive defenseman, and by consistent I mean have even a good game every, couple of days,
Yeah.
that would be huge for the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, he went into this game and then almost doubled his season point totals in
Yeah.
this game. Like he had 7 points going into this game. Or no, he had 8 points going into this game. He now has 13 on the season. So
He's going to be
big,
a
big
player
night.
that I'm going to watch, down the road,
Definitely.
see if he can continue, because if he can continue to emerge, then that's going to be absolutely massive for the Bruins.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy that I thought played really, really well in this game and liked a lot was Craig Smith, and another guy that we needed to see more from. We wanted to see him contribute more. Goal and assist in this game for Smith, +2 rating, 3 shots, 2 hits, played 16 minutes. I thought this was a very strong game for Craig Smith.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we saw from him last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Last year he had an extremely good season, but the main, skill set that he brings to the table, he drives to the net, and he seems to be always where the puck is. And we talk about the, month long break. I wonder if Smith was one of the ones who was able to benefit from it, because again, we're starting to see him find his footing, and if he can turn it on, down the stretch here, along with Grislick and along with these other depth players, then that helps the Bruins dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And the last player I want to talk about is the goaltender, Linus Olmark. Because this is one of those games where statistically, it really doesn't tell the whole story because his stats are okay. Stopped 27 out of 30, gave up 3 goals, which is fine. 900 save percentage on the dot, not great, just okay. He had okay stats in this game. Linus Ullmark saved this game for the Bruins multiple times, especially in the first period. Like
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
absolutely.
this is one of those games where the stats don't tell the whole story because Washington had some grade A opportunities in the first to extend their lead to 3, even 4-0 or 3-4-1, and Ullmark made some monster stops and really allowed the Bruins to come back in this game.
It was one of those. types of, survive and advance games.
Mm-hmm.
And the statistics when Washington and Boston meet never favor the goaltenders on either side.
Yeah.
And Allmark was able to just do his job and hold his own. It kind of reminded me of Rask last year in the playoffs. There were times, albeit the end result of the series being very lopsided, where Washington was able to find a surge, and
Yep.
yet Allmark remained calm and collected in the net. Again, his statistics weren't great, but this is one of those situations where the statistics don't tell the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very impressed with his effort because playing against Washington is never an easy task.
No, definitely not. And now, we look at Allmark starting both of these games against Tampa and Washington and winning both of them. Giving up 2 goals to Tampa, only giving up 3 goals to Washington. Like that, Allmark is showing something here. He is really starting to find his groove and has been playing extremely well.
Yeah, and even when we signed him last year, if you can have a winning record with the Buffalo Sabres,
Yep.
then you definitely have something here. And he's been proving his worth. Again, the Bruins have seemed to have done a good job of finding backup goaltenders, and Allmark looks to be another notch in the belt in that regard.
Yeah, so those were the last 3 games. Those are the games that have happened since our last recording. And again, we wanted Boston to win or get 6 out of a possible 10 points over this 5-game stretch. We're through 3 of those games, and they already have 4 points. So all they have to do is win at least one of their upcoming couple of games, and they will get that 6 points. And if they win both, we could be looking at 8 out of a possible 10 points during this very tough 5-game stretch for the Bruins. That's what I want to look at next, though, is the upcoming games, because the schedule does not get any easier beyond Philadelphia on Thursday. The Bruins have another very tough week coming up, and we're going to talk about that. First, though, we're going to start with Montreal, which is the game tonight. Now, by the time that you guys watching see this on Friday, obviously the Montreal game and the Philadelphia game will have happened. But as of us recording this, they have not happened yet. It's, almost noontime now on Wednesday. So Montreal game, Bruins coming off of 2 monster road wins against very tough opponents, coming back to home ice against one of the worst teams in the entire NHL in the Montreal Canadiens. Huge rivalry game, but Montreal stunk this year. This feels like it could be a trap game to me. How do you feel about this?
I was just about to say the exact same thing. This
Yeah,
feels like a trap game in every sense of the word. Look, the tensions are going to be high. It's a rivalry game. Montreal has nothing to lose. If they can upset Boston here, that could be one of the high points of their season. And so
absolutely.
I could honestly see the Bruins losing tonight. Or, yeah. I mean,
Unfortunately, this does feel like kind of a trap. I mean, you're coming off of two games against very difficult opponents on the road. You come back to home ice. You kind of get that little bit more of comfort level being at home as opposed to on the road. And it feels like if the Bruins aren't very, very careful to maintain the intensity and the focus that they've had for the last couple games, this does feel like it could be a trap game. I really hope it isn't, but I feel like it could be.
I feel like it could be one of those games where it's tied 3-3, and then with 10 seconds left in the third period, Montreal is going to get a bouncing puck to go their
Yeah,
way
some
into the
deflection
net.
goal. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it does. It feels like it could be that kind of night. Hopefully it isn't. Boston obviously should win this game. I mean, Montreal has 7 wins all year. They're brutal. They stink. Boston should win this game, but it does have that trap game feel to it. And I'm really hoping that the Bruins continue to play the way that they did against Tampa and Washington, because if they do, they're going to blow the Canadians out of the building tonight.
And I really hope that's the case, especially when you look at some of the other games on the schedule, some of the more tougher games. This is
Yeah.
a game where you need to pick up points. We talked about it last week. The playoff races are close. Any chance you can pick up points, you have to do so. This is a game on Wednesday that they have to capitalize on.
Yeah, definitely. So Boston has Montreal at home tonight. Then tomorrow, Thursday, they have the Philadelphia Flyers on home ice. So back-to-back games at home for the Bruins. Philadelphia is another team kind of struggling, not kind of, really struggling this year. Having a lot of trouble finding ways to win. Another team that the Bruins absolutely should beat, but it's the second half of a back-to-back, and those games always kind of tend to be on the tough side. You're pretty tired at that point. The fact that there's no travel definitely benefits the Bruins, that they're both at home. But, again, to me, this is a game that the Bruins should win against Philadelphia, but there are some circumstances that are not in their favor.
I was going to say, at the very least, they don't have to travel, which last season, I remember in particular, they had some back-to-backs where they had to travel and they ended up playing very poorly. So
Yep.
I'll be interested to see how Thursday goes. I'm not going to chalk it up as a win just because of those factors, but being on home ice for back-to-back games will certainly be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. So Philly coming up Thursday night. By the time we'll know what happens in those games by the time this show is out publicly. But hopefully the Bruins win both of them. They should win both of them. Those are definitely teams that the Bruins should beat. But I feel like I wouldn't be overly surprised if there's one slip up in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either, especially when you talk about Wednesday night. I feel like Wednesday night, in a game that is supposed to be a gimme game,
Yeah,
it's not going to end up being that way.
yeah, I agree with you on that. So that gets us now to the end of that 10 games or 10 point stretch, 5 game stretch that we talked about last week. Then we get into a new stretch of games coming up this weekend and next week for the Bruins that are also going to be very, very difficult. Starting with the Nashville Predators on Saturday afternoon, another home game for the Bruins. Bruins are on a big home stretch now. They've got let's see, Montreal, Philadelphia, Nashville, Carolina, Washington, Winnipeg, and Anaheim, all at home. Boston doesn't go back on the road until January 26th against Colorado. So they've got really like 2 weeks at home now. They're at home Saturday afternoon, the 15th at 1 p.m. against the Nashville Predators. This, let me tell you, folks, I don't know how closely you've been following the Western Conference, but the Nashville Predators are the top team in the Central Division right now, having a fantastic year, 24 wins already, 50 points, and they have won 12 out of their last 14 games. This is going to be a tough matchup on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and the Nashville Predators, they may, fly under the radar in terms of, you know, big, NHL teams, but they are a good hockey team.
Yep.
They play physical, they can score goals, they play that Western Conference brand of hockey, that West Coast brand of hockey that is very difficult to beat. I mean, we saw it with Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Nashville, plays similarly. So,
Yep.
um, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bruins fall to Nashville, but I hope not. I hope. I really hope not.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Minnesota because I think Nashville is a similar style to the Minnesota Wild. I think a little bit less offense, a little bit more defense than what Minnesota's done over the course of the year, although the particular game between the Bruins and the Wild was more defensive. But that physicality, that nastiness, that animosity that we saw in the Minnesota game, I think we're going to see in the Nashville game. Nashville leads the NHL in fights this year. They're an extremely physical team. They're not gonna back down from anybody. They're a nasty group to play against. They've got guys on all 4 lines that can mix it up physically, and they just play a big, nasty brand of gritty hockey that is common in the Western Conference. And Boston's got to be ready for that on Saturday because Nashville will not only beat you, but they'll beat you up while doing it too.
Absolutely. If they can get out of Saturday's game with even a point, I'll be
Yeah.
happy.
All
A
right.
point and no injuries.
Yeah, a point and no injuries will be good enough for me on Saturday, to say the least. But if Boston can get the win and get 2, that would be another statement win for the Bruins, without a doubt. especially with the Predators, how hot they've been recently. 12-1-1 in their last 14 games. I mean, that is nuts.
100%. And, you know, this is going to be another stretch where we see if the Bruins can hang with some of the league's best, and
Yep.
it's going to be another good litmus test for sure.
Yeah, speaking of some of the league's best, it doesn't get any easier as the Bruins get 2 days off, Sunday and Monday, and then Tuesday, jumping ahead, Tuesday night here, they get the Carolina Hurricanes at home on Tuesday night. And let me tell you, Carolina, the top team right now in the Metropolitan Division, 50 points through 33 games. If you break the league down by point percentage, Carolina is the number one team in the NHL this season. 24-7-2 on the year for Carolina. Plus 42 goal differential, also best in the league. This is going to be as difficult of an opponent as the Bruins will see all season on Tuesday night. Carolina is the best of the best.
And it's interesting. We've kind of seen Carolina grow up due to all the playoff matches with the Bruins, and
Yep,
now they've come into their own and
yep.
kind of fully developed into the team that, quite frankly, we thought that they were going to be. And there's not a lot of players and teams that we can say that about historically. And so I'm going to be excited to watch Carolina. These teams have a bit of history, like I said, obviously with the
Yep.
playoff matchups.
Yep.
And this is going to be another good test for the Bruins. We thought on last week's show that last week was difficult. This stretch right here is going to be even more so a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, because that brings us to Thursday night, January 20th, and Boston gets Washington again. This time in Boston as opposed to in the capital, but home game against a Capitals team that is going to be looking for revenge and going to be playing with an extra chip on their shoulder after what happened Monday night in the way that the Bruins blew them out of their own building. The Caps are going to be coming back with a whole new effort on Thursday night. And again, that's going to be another tough game here for the Bruins against a quality opponent. And they're going to have to, show that they can beat the best in the league and the other top teams around the NHL.
If there's one game through this stretch that I would consider maybe an easy game, it would be this Washington game. But even that's no gimme. That is not a gimme game. This is going to be a tough game. It's just one of the easier ones on what is an incredibly difficult schedule.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think if I was picking Boston to win one of these games, I would pick the Washington game. But at the same time, I think Washington is going to come in with such an attitude and such an anger to their game because of what happened Monday night and because they got blown out on home ice by the Bruins. I think this is going to be another very tough game and that Washington is really going to want to take this one.
As a hockey fan, this upcoming week is going to be incredibly fun to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm definitely excited for this slate. I just hope that the Bruins can kind of hold their own. And what's the expression that we've used a lot? Tread water. I hope that
Yeah.
they tread water this week for sure.
All right, man. These three games coming up after Friday: Nashville, Carolina, Washington. Three very difficult games. I will be happy if Boston goes 1-1-1 in this stretch. Just give me 1-1-1, 3 out of 6 points. Very tough opponents. I'm happy at that point if I'm a Bruins fan. What about you?
I was going to say the same thing. This is another week where if the Bruins can just hold their own and not, you know, end the week with 0 points,
Yeah, don't
I'll
go
be happy.
0-3, please.
Yeah, if they go 0-3, then
That's a problem.
then yeah, that is a big problem. But I'll just be happy, like you said, if they go 1-1-1. I'm not expecting them to win all three games, and if they do, that's awesome. But
Yeah.
I don't see it happening. This is another difficult week, so 1-1-1 sounds very reasonable.
Yeah, obviously we want the Bruins to win every game, and we'd love for them to go 3-0 and all of that. But we're trying to be on the realistic side here, especially with how tough this schedule is and how tough these opponents are. So I'm with you. I'd be very, very happy with 1-1-1. Just get through this stretch and it's not going to be this hard of a schedule forever. You're going to get some more gimme games in there at some point. But definitely still a very tough part of the schedule in January right now for Boston.
Yeah, and this is going to be a good test. You talk about the fluctuating standings. Where will the Bruins sit in the standings at the end of this month? That will tell a lot, I think, about how the rest of the season will play out.
Absolutely. All right, man. That's gonna bring us to the end here of episode 50, and boy, it was a good one. Always fun to talk hockey with you, man. We got to cover Tuukka Rask, some trade rumors this past week, upcoming week preview. It was an awesome show, dude. Thank you so much for coming on again, and we'll definitely have to do this again soon.
Thank you always for having me on, and if you're around next week, I'm available to do it next week.
All right, it looks
So,
like Danny's the
yeah.
co-host now. It's gonna be us two every week.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you to everybody for watching. Obviously, this show could not be happening if people weren't watching. And big thank you to Mark Allred again and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them. It's brought to you through B&G Productions, and great people there covering the Boston Bruins. Go to the website, blackandgoldhockey.com. You can see all the great articles written by the writers. You can see the podcasts uploaded by the podcast network, a bunch of different Bruins-related shows. Obviously this show as well here on YouTube. So big thank you to everybody at B&G for the support. Also, don't forget about those links in the description, whether it's Boston Bruins apparel from another NHL team, NCAA college apparel. It's all there using those 3 links. So it would really mean a lot if you could check those out. But that is going to bring us to the end of episode 50. We will have a whole new week of Bruins hockey to talk about coming up next week for episode 51. Sounds like Danny's going to be back again. And it's going to be, hopefully, a great week of Bruins hockey coming up. But thank you guys again so much for watching. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. And we'll be talking to you guys again very soon next week. See you guys next time.